We were told we'd get an answer several times over the past 6 months. We still don't have an answer.
So Philip and his co-workers, they drafted this plan here. This is a rendering of what the front of the post office could look like.
While this is not the fiscal situation we wanted to be in, years of neglect in our services and infrastructure have led us to this point.
Welcome to This Week Uncut, where we take a look at the week's top stories from CHCO-TV and The Courier. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki, Hogarth.
We begin this week with the Passamaquoddy Lodge Foundation in St. Andrews, who's looking for some movement from the provincial government on a new long-term care model that they established roughly 7 or 8 years ago.
Exactly. I don't think this will be news to anyone in the St. Andrews area that the Passamaquoddy Lodge Development Committee has been busy with these plans for, like you said, about 7 years now. And these plans are for a household model type new lodge. And a lot of these kind of ideas, I think in the time of COVID-19, we really learned how important it is to have rooms that can be isolated so that things like illnesses don't have to spread so easily, that you could be able to sort of not lock off, but cut off certain parts of the long-term care home if people were sick in one area. So that's one idea behind these plans. Another interesting thing about these plans is that they're about intergenerational living as well. So we know that the the daycare in St. Andrews already has a wait list for people waiting to get their children into that care center. So the new lodge also incorporates a daycare with 118 spots for children. And this way it brings the community of all ages to one place, allows the seniors who live in the Passamaquoddy Lodge to be witness to some of the youngest people from their community throughout the day too, and it makes the lodge more of a hub. The current lodge right now was built in 1973, so the model itself is quite dated. Carolyn Davies, who is the chair of the Passamaquoddy Lodge Development Committee, stopped by the TV studio to talk about it. I know a lot of us have had family members who have gone to live at the lodge. My grandma was there for a number of years too, so I have great memories of going up there, but I understand her point. She talked a lot about the fact that, back when it was built, people were going to long-term care homes a lot earlier. Some of them could even drive. They were a little bit more mobile. It wasn't the way we see now, where you tend to go a lot later in life, maybe when you are more likely housebound anyway. So, and there's things they have to do that she feels, not necessarily having a door somewhere that they've had to remove because it can't fit a wheelchair. So there are a lot of updates that they're really looking to bring into this century.
Yeah, my coverage of this particular topic does predate my time here at CHCO-TV, because I did cover this when I was at Global. And you'll recall that in 2023, it was a different government. So this project started with the Progressive Conservative government under Premier Blaine Higgs, and it is now in the hands of a new Liberal government under Premier Susan Holt. So there's been a change in leadership, there has been a change in government, and presumably an attitude toward what we now know is a significant amount of spending in order to improve. And their argument has always been, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, is that they're working towards paying 4 years of underinvestment. It would seem that this would be the government that would be the one to pull the trigger on this project, but it seems like there is a bit of feet dragging when it comes to this particular issue.
Yes, and when you talk about it too, we've had 13 acres that have been given by the town. The town of St. Andrews has donated the land. The board themselves, the development committee, they've come up with the $600,000 through fundraising in order to do the studies and the research necessary to come up with a plan that the province would approve. But you're right, it comes down to the province right now, which is why Carolyn Davies stopped by. She's planning 2 more open houses. Now, these will be on November 25th. Originally, it was supposed to be November 18th. It got moved to the 25th just to give them more time. They will be at the W.C. O'Neill Arena, November 25th, so that's Tuesday. There is a chance you're watching this after the fact, so you will see the interview with Carolyn that we did, so you can get involved even if you weren't able to make it to the open houses, but they will be Tuesday, November 25th. There's 2 different ones if you prefer daytime, 2 to 3:30 p.m. With the presentation at 2:30. Then there's an evening one from 5:30 to 7 p.m. with the presentation at 6:30 p.m. And it's such a blur. I've known Nathalie for so many years as a journalist. It feels like you've been at CHCO and The Courier a lot longer, just because of the many times our careers crossed paths before when you were at Global News, which is how we got to know you and got to love you as well. So I do remember being with you there. It's so funny. I couldn't remember if it was with us or when you were at Global. But I think this event, this open house, will be similar to that, except the urgency will be very much highlighted and how the community can get together and advocate for this lodge.
And perhaps there is something to the fact that, the government has put a lot of emphasis on the Nursing Home Without Walls program. The idea is that they want people to stay in their homes longer. So perhaps an investment in a long-term care facility like this one is not where they want to spend their money. Regardless of that, when I did that story in 2023, they were talking about the physical limitations of the current facility and the growing needs in the community. So that hasn't changed, presumably. I will say it's very interesting because when you'll hear Carolyn talking about how there was a lot of loneliness during COVID-19, and that's why they designed this model. And I looked back on a few studies, research studies through different universities and health organizations to kind of understand what she meant by that. And there were, in the first 6 months of COVID, so during that first wave, I'm using words that people might remember. During that first wave, there, even in nursing homes or long-term care facilities that had fewer COVID-19 deaths, there were more general deaths overall. And that was because a large percentage of the people living in nursing homes and living in long-term care facilities were experiencing depression because they couldn't see their loved ones because of isolation, because of mass infection, or because the province didn't want to let people in because of the risk to these vulnerable people. So this model is something that they've taken the time, as you mentioned, to research and prepare. So it'll be up to the government to take the next step. And I think Carolyn is trying to put the issue back in the spotlight again, and she certainly is passionate about getting this completed.
And just for everyone's reference at home, what they need is the approval of the province as well as the per diem. So it's not that the funding all comes from the province. That's important to keep in mind as well. They're relying a lot on their own fundraising efforts. I think on private donors as well. However they can get it off the ground, the sooner, obviously, the better. We did reach out, though, to social development, and this was the formal answer they sent back. We asked a couple questions, just whether this approval would come soon. So the Department of Social Development, in their statement, said, the Department of Social Development is aware of the request to replace Passamaquoddy Lodge in St. Andrews. While internal analyses and discussions are ongoing, there is no further update to share at this time. So if that is not reason for people to come out and hear more on Tuesday, there you have it. So it will be interesting to learn more from where Carolyn sees this going. But I think another important point to mention is that you talked about isolation, especially in COVID. I think many of us took part in parades that went around lodges and things like that. But there was something about that glass barrier in between that made you really feel for all these residents who didn't have contact with their friends, their neighbors, for such a long period of time. And Carolyn's worry too is that if we don't establish a more up-to-date facility in our community, you're going to be seeing people from the community, a place they've lived, loved, and built up, really, the generations that we owe the most to, having to go to St. John, to Fredericton, to find a long-term care home that could actually suit their needs, as opposed to staying in a community that is the one that is really they identify with.
Yeah, of course, and that means moving to, that's the other thing they're trying to avoid, moving them into larger cities, places they're not familiar with, who are further from their families. And I remember during COVID actually watching a family. I spoke to a family who was frustrated by, at the time, Shannex's rules about being able to see their loved ones. And I went with them for a visit through the glass, and their loved one died just days later, right? And they never got to see them again, alive. So it's certainly something that's important. Human connection is important. And we'll see what the government decides, but I'm going to be following up with the Department of Social Development because we're almost to 2026. So 3 years of analysis and research is a long time.
And I think obviously prices with the way things are going will only go up. I should mention though the funding model, Carolyn said the government is not paying for the build, only the per diem, okay? So, and they also have to give it approval to go ahead. So it'll be funded in part by per diem via the province and also residence payments and donations and fundraising and the like. So it is a big project. Another thing that Carolyn wanted to stress too is that a lot of people in the community don't even know where the lodge is right now. They're especially newcomers to town. If you say we have a long-term care home here, sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, where? And it's, you know, this one where if you've passed by the bar road, there's a visible sign marker of where it will be when it gets off the ground. I want to stay positive. But yes, there's definitely been a lot of planning and part with the age-friendly committee as well to make this a reality. So they're really hoping, at least for people coming out on Tuesday, they can give you that update in person of where they're at and explain in what ways they feel you could be of assistance to getting this moving forward.
We're going to take a listen to Caroline Davies and her thoughts on the new Passamaquoddy Lodge.
So we had, as everybody's aware, we have had a new government for a year now. And we did meet with the Minister for Social Development and the Minister for Seniors in last January to brief them on our proposal. And we had, around the table, we had representatives from the community. So we had people from the Passamaquoddy Children's Center, we had people from the Wellness Center, we had the mayor and a couple of people from town council, we had philanthropists. They were impressed that this was a community-driven process versus a small group from a board saying this is what we think. And they really liked the idea, and they did commit at that point to giving us an answer, yes, no, or yes with conditions by the end of March. In fairness, we had to do some homework too. There is a template that the department has to capture all the data, financial and other, that will allow them to see if we meet the requirements vis-a-vis the regulations and also vis-a-vis the cost per diem. And one of the things that I don't think people fully understand is the government is not paying for this. The financial model has changed, and it is, in this case, it'd be a community-driven. We would raise the money, and we would borrow money, and we would have to manage that as you would if you were running your own business, as if you were buying a home and had a mortgage. So what the government's commitment would be the per diem that would allow us to hire staff and maintain the facility. So it's new for us in terms of a process, new for some of the people in government, and that took us a bit longer maybe to get the numbers. We did submit them. We were told we'd get an answer several times over the past 6 months. We still don't have an answer, and I guess our frustration is, I think the community deserves an answer. The community's put their heart and soul out there. They also did the Healthy Seniors Pilot Project in 2022, 2023. The report was submitted to the government in 2023. Out of that, we now have an activity center and a workout space for seniors co-located with the youth center. We have the Charlotte County Seniors Resource Center, which is under the wings of the Passamaquoddy Lodge. They wanted an adult, as I mentioned, an adult day program and a therapy pool and a community kitchen. Those things all have to be built, and we can't. We're now being accused of, you asked us to do all this work and you're not going to do anything. It's you've let the ball drop, and I don't think this community deserves to feel that they've had the ball drop. We should get an answer, and I think we need to get an answer that allows our seniors to live in a facility that meets their needs. The current facility does not meet the needs of somebody who has a walker, a wheelchair, and needs a lift to move them from one to the other. The rooms aren't big enough. We also would repurpose the current facility, part of it for special care beds, so people who are currently languishing on the second floor of Charlotte County Hospital because they're there not for hospital needs, but because there's no place for them to go to transition back to home to get the care they need, but they maybe have more independence than, say, somebody who needs full-on nursing home care. We would repurpose that. We can't move forward on that either. It's just like, everybody says it checks all the boxes, but if it does, then let's go.
Is there any fear of losing it, of not being, what could be bigger obstacles, let's say, if this is the delay? Obviously, we know in the world we're living in, things like tariffs can even factor into to change cost and things like that.
Well, costs have risen just we've been asked to come up with costing. We've been asked to revisit it. We've worked. It's a group of volunteers that have worked extremely hard for the last nearly 8 years to make this happen. So we raised over $600,000 to help pay for all this. You know, there are renderings and stuff that doesn't come for free. The Class D construction costs, we had to contract that. But we also, the town has committed 13 acres of land at the corner of Bar Road in Champlain, which would be serviced land that would meet the needs of our proposed building. We get a new council in May. What if they change their mind? If there's no service land in town, the cost goes up because you're going to have to move it outside of the old town limits and put in sewage and water. Mm-hmm. We have philanthropists who have been asking us when this is going to happen because they want to donate money, and we're not talking $1,000. We're talking large amounts of money. We're going to raise $20 million to help keep the costs of this reasonable and to provide the facility that we believe people in southwest New Brunswick deserve. So we could lose all that. We have a dedicated committee of volunteers who have been working on this. At some point, they don't need to be hit on the head anymore. So you know, at some point, maybe the community is not going to lead this.
That was Carolyn Davies discussing plans for the new Passamaquoddy Lodge in St. Andrews.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss the ballooning deficit for the New Brunswick government.
Additionally, we have a strong position when it comes to net debt per capita as well, behind only Alberta and Saskatchewan in this category.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon. We're going to go to the provincial legislature in Fredericton because they announced their most recent quarter results, which to New Brunswickers was probably not what they wanted to hear. This is an $837 million deficit, and that is the largest deficit in 2 decades.
Okay, what's your takeaway from learning that number, though? Are there things that might be long-term investment that could pay off down the road, or is it something that will make for a very miserable December here?
I think financially this spells trouble for the Liberal government. You know, the big thing that we've talked about consistently is that the Liberal government made a campaign promise to balance the budget, because if you remember, in the days of the Progressive Conservative government, one of the big successes of former Premier Blaine Higgs was his fiscal responsibility, and namely the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. People moved here because of how we were handling it. So this is certainly something that's going to be a sticking point. And I was on the press conference with Minister Renee Legacy talking about why we are here. And so you'll remember that the reason they've said that we're here is because they're paying for years of underinvestment. But what that looks like is very complicated, and there's the Department of Health is over budget, I believe, by $148 million due to operational costs for the regional health authorities and the investments they're making in primary care. You'll recall there are plans for 30 collaborative care clinics, 10 in the first 18 months of the mandate, and we're closing in on that very quickly. The Department of Social Development is also over budget, largely due to social assistance and income payments. The Department of Justice and Public Safety is also over budget. The Department of Natural Resources is over budget, dealing with those forest fires we saw this summer.
Okay, and what are the critics saying when it comes to overspending?
Sure. So I think for a lot of people, the question is this going to continue the way that it is? And the finance minister said, wouldn't say, no, I'm not, it's not going to be more than that. But what was interesting to me is that he said they did have to make difficult choices, and they did have to say no to departments that asked for things. I never got clarity on sort of where they said no and who they said no to, but they said the deficit could have been 1.5 to 1.7 million. So it could have been much worse. He's not ruling out that it won't reach 1 billion in the next 2 quarters. And the Premier herself has said that she doesn't know if they're going to be able to balance the budget next year or the year after or the year after. So really she's setting herself up to not balance the budget despite that promise. What is really interesting for us and what will be important for folks in Charlotte County is there are several infrastructure projects that were promised through what's called the integrated bilateral agreements. So what this means is that the federal government gives the province money, the province gets it through the Regional Development Corporation, and then they give it to a proponent, which is typically universities, municipalities, local organizations that want and need to improve infrastructure. And the Assistant Deputy Minister, Nick McCann, told us that several projects had been delayed. And so he was asked what those projects were. So he spoke to 4 in particular. The Rossway Wastewater Project, which is they're going to move away from the lagoons and into an actual treatment facility. The UMB Law Building, so the old courthouse, which people will be familiar with on Queen Street, is going to be no longer the courthouse. They're building a big fancy new one on King Street right next to the Performing Arts Center. And that building is then going to be renovated into the University of New Brunswick's Law Building. And the Mount Allison University Library Rehabilitation Project, I think that's a $68 million project, an expansive project. And the 4th and final project was the St. Andrews Market Wharf and Market Square expansion. So these projects have been delayed, and they've been delayed for varying reasons. Cost, overages, tenders coming in too high, changing the scope of the project has also delayed these projects. So they said to us that this is impacting both their revenue and their expenses. So this is hitting them on both sides. Okay. So it's going to be a challenge.
Okay, but at least from that Market Square Wharf shout out from the government, it's not as significant cost, I would say, as some of those other projects sound like they're quite hefty.
Yeah, for sure. It was the lowest of the other 3 that were mentioned. But this is an important project to the people here in St. Andrews in particular. And it has not been a smooth process. And they're going to go and take a look at that structural integrity of the wharf. They have awarded a tender of $99,000 for a structural assessment for the wharf. So the next steps are in place. The money is still there. The deadline is March 2027. They have lots of time to turn this around, get this money that they have spent, although they might need to look for more funding channels because it is not where the tenders were. I think the lowest tender was $9.2 million.
Wow, okay. So what would it mean if, let's say, all 4 of those projects somehow get off the ground in 2026 for the province? Would that get them out of the trouble they're seeing themselves in, or would it really not really crack a dent?
No.
Okay.
No. The reason why this is important is because it has local context, but certainly the majority of their problems is in their spending. They're spending more money, and they're telling New Brunswickers that they're spending more money because they want you to have a primary care provider. They want more qualified teachers in the classroom, despite cutting library workers. But we're sort of seeing the pieces fall apart, and so largely it is their spending. All but 3 departments are over budget. So and they're not seeing the revenue. They're getting less corporate income tax, less personal income tax, and a lot of it, surprisingly, cannot be blamed on the U.S. trade war. Okay. So this is a problem of their own making, and so it'll be interesting to see how this progresses forward.
Okay, so we're saying the tariffs haven't even factored in that greatly, or even the relationship with the U.S. that has been tense since the Trump administration.
It doesn't appear that way, at least from what we were told. Largely, it is conditional grants, federal transfers, corporate income tax, personal income tax. It's really not related to the trade war. So certainly it might be something that, and these things like the trade war in particular might not be something that people notice right away. These are designed over time to pick away at a country's economy. So certainly, while we may not see it now, it doesn't mean we won't see it in the future.
Right. But then I think, too, when you look at things like COVID-19 was not something that could have been predicted, and it did come with its own consequences, costs, and things like that. At the same time, the province didn't take on a big deficit at that time.
Sure, and it was arguably because they were spending, people weren't going anywhere, and things weren't happening, and they saw a large influx of people coming to New Brunswick, and so that would have raised personal income tax, that would have raised corporate income tax. Right. So what we're seeing now is the more financial drawback of COVID-19.
Okay.
So they're still dealing with that, right? I think economies across the world are still dealing with that. Supply chain issues, the cost of everything. Personally, you feel it at the grocery store. So certainly this is a tough time for everyone. The minister says tough decisions are coming. Okay. We asked him what those are, and he couldn't say other than, he had said no to a few departments that wanted more spending money.
Okay. So. What do you think will be the next checkpoint that shows us whether they have this on track? I know you talk about the idea of investing in the future, how underspending in the past may have left us in a situation that's more dire now. But what would be a point down the road where we could say, okay, we can judge now a little more clearly that these decisions were more rational than maybe some of their critics think they are right now?
Sure. The minister said transformational change takes time. So this will be up to New Brunswickers. He admitted in a question that I asked him that they certainly lost a lot of political capital, some political capital, in not balancing the budget. But it will be up to New Brunswickers to decide whether or not they are seeing the results of that transformative change through increased spending. Are you off the waiting list for a doctor? Are you seeing that doctor in a reasonable amount of time? Are there more qualified teachers in your kids' classroom? Are they getting a well-rounded education? All of these things are we seeing more change in terms of the housing crisis? Are we seeing less visible homelessness? That will be up to New Brunswickers, and they will be the ones that will decide in 4 years whether or not they got their money's worth.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. When you think, if you could go back in time and invest in affordable housing 20, 30 years ago, wouldn't we all do that? So, these are questions to look at from many different angles.
Hindsight is always 2020. We're going to let you take a listen to some questions from journalists to Finance Minister Renee Legacy.
First question, as we heard the technical briefing, little of this can be blamed on the U.S. trade dispute and tariffs. Is that concerning to you, knowing what potentially could come down the pipeline in the months ahead?
Well, honestly, Adam, it's a good question. The real issue with the situation with the States is really the uncertainty and really the long term. And we've been living almost through two crises now. I heard the questions a while ago from the technical side. We are still seeing impact 5 years later on our economy from COVID, from 2020. So what's really scary is what will come down 3-4 years down the road. On the short term, the direct impact from tariffs has not been overly felt because, again, and the Prime Minister of Canada brings this up often, we still have a very good deal with the U.S. CUSMA covers a lot. If you exclude metals and the auto sector and now, unfortunately, forestry. But it's the uncertainty. Everybody, even if you're covered by CUSMA, the industry wonders, are they going to be next, or could something change? And that just seems to have been slowing down investments in the economy.
Okay. My follow-up, you were elected last fall in part on, fixing the healthcare system and improving it. The expenditures show, a significant, expenditures are significantly up in healthcare. But I mean, my question is, are New Brunswickers actually seeing improved services? Because, and I'd argue they currently aren't, despite all this spending.
Well, there's increase in spending, but it is different. I know we often look at the bottom line where it's, health is 4 billion plus, and we see the ups and downs of that 40 billion, but there's a makeup of that also. In previous years, we often every quarter would talk about the extra costs in healthcare. A lot of it was associated on a bad deal with travel nurses. Some of it this year is on different aspects. It's an increased demand, and some of it is transformational change that's going to take time to take effect. When we look at the community health centers, it's not immediate. It's going to take time, and hopefully we'll see the results of that in the future years. But it's not a do it and you get the result right away. Hopefully, and I believe we're on the right path to change our path forward on health.
Hi, in the press release, you say there's going to have to be difficult choices ahead, including in the current fiscal year. You're also saying governments had to make up for years of neglect, spending neglect, I guess. The premier said that healthcare is sort of off the table because it's so important and it takes up a large chunk of the budget. So I guess I'm just wondering, with Q2 numbers and 4.5 months left in the fiscal year, when are we going to see the difficult choices? Are they coming this year? What are they?
That's a great question, Jacques, and I know the premier brought this up I think it was last week. I know we often equate difficult choices with cuts or something disappearing. To be honest, some of those difficult choices we are facing, and I get meetings on a weekly or by almost multiple times a week from different groups, different departments that have had underinvestments for years, and they're asking for more. They're asking for a lot. And to be truthful, sometimes we can't acquiesce to their demands. And that's a difficult situation. It's a difficult decision. But you'll never see that decision because we're just not investing. So there's a lot of that going on, and it weighs heavy on our mind because we definitely see the need. But as we go along, yeah, there's going to be further difficult decisions on where we invest, and there might have to be a little bit of I would say focus, where we're going to have to pick where we want to put our attention.
I know this projects out to end of March 2026, but the projections have been changing over the course of the year. How confident are you that we won't hit $1 billion deficit by the time everything shakes out this year?
Well, this again, and I brought it up in my remarks. This was as of September 30th. We know already things have changed. This afternoon, you're going to see an announcement for the medical society that's going to have a serious impact again on our results. But it's a decision that has to be made. It's going to have an impact. So if nothing else changes on revenues or on some improvement on expenses, there is a potential that it could still grow by fourth quarter, because this agreement is going to be signed soon, and we won't actually see the impact of that till Q3 or Q4.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to follow up again on Alex and Jacques' question. I'm wondering if you can give us specific examples of departments and what they've asked for specifically, that would have you would have had to say no to, that maybe New Brunswickers wouldn't notice, but maybe they would if it was being provided.
I don't know, maybe Nick, try to jog my memory. It's been a while. And to be honest, Nathalie, we're full into capital budget for this year, and we're starting next year. So I'm not sure which is what year right now.
Perhaps you could follow up with me on that
Yeah,
question.
I can follow up for you, Nathalie.
Sure, thanks. So When we spoke to the premier about a balanced budget, she said she wasn't confident that you could do it in the second year, maybe not even in the third. And I know that that was a strong election promise, and the previous government had a lot of success because of its financial management. So do you think that New Brunswickers are going to think that this is a fair trade-off given the spending and affordability measures that this government is undertaking? Like, do you think they think the deficit is worth it, or are they going to maybe have feelings about that when 4 years comes around?
Well, that's a good question, Natalie. It's a very good political question, actually, because I would argue that yes, the previous government had success in getting the bottom line, getting the surpluses in. But when I look from department to department and underinvestments and the need that has to be invested that chronically had been underinvested in, and now we're working with a patchwork of short-term fixes and nothing stable. It's becoming very costly, and we need to correct that and just so I'm not sure it was all successful. It depends how you measure success. We're now making some investments for the long term. I think it's a political for us. It's given away some of our political capital, because some of the benefits that'll come from that change may not show up for another 5-10 years, but it's the right decision. We have to make that move for the good of the province and the future of our economy.
That was Finance Minister René Lagacé talking to journalists about the newly announced deficit by the provincial government.
We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be hearing about 2 newsworthy items from the November council meeting for Eastern Charlotte.
But it's something to definitely to consider. It would definitely breathe life into our downtown.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And I'm Vicki Hogarth. We're heading over to Eastern Charlotte, where there were a lot of really interesting things at the November council meeting. It did kick off with an update on water quality in Blacks Harbour. It was a presentation done by On Globe, who I think everyone who follows this show especially will remember one of their earlier presentations this year. They were tasked with finding a new long-term water source for the area.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing issue for a while, and certainly one that I also covered during my time at Global News. This has been a frustrating thing for the people of Blacks Harbour, for certain councillors around the chamber, and for the council as a whole. The context here is that the water supply is owned by a private company and has been owned by a private company since the area of Blacks Harbour was incorporated. So and they're facing challenges taking that water supply over. But there's also questions about whether it's worth taking that water supply over. Do they need to find a new water supply? What are the solutions here? So this presentation is going to be something that people were looking for, but probably not quick enough.
I think that if anyone really wants to get into the real meat of it, it's really worth going on either CHCO's YouTube page and finding the November meeting, because the On Globe presentation is about the first hour of the meeting. It was a long one, the November meeting, a very interesting meeting, but definitely about a 2-hour meeting, and the On Globe presentation was the first half of the meeting. So it's really interesting, especially if you are a resident of Blacks Harbour. You might want to know in more detail what their representatives had to say. They did a lot of explanations about why, you might see certain colorings right now, what they're doing, how their negotiations have gone in terms of dealing with landowners too, as they try to figure out what the next steps will be. But this is we're middle ground right now, and we'll have more updates going into the winter. It was interesting to sit through it, to hear the presentation. And I think that a lot of people in the community are just happy that we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, that we are going somewhere. It's definitely a unique situation having Connors Brothers as the owners of the water source. That's not something most communities could relate to at any point in time. So they are navigating this I guess situation that has been grandfathered in there, that they are trying to bring into a more modern, up-to-date idea of how to
Yeah, this is a challenging situation. You will recall a story in the Courier about the sheer number of residents that stood up and told the council that I've lost thousands of dollars. I'm one of the only 2 businesses in town, and I've lost thousands of dollars from closures of boil water orders on, replacing and keeping filters going. A woman stood up and told a story about, boiling her water for her baby bottles 30 years ago. So this is a 30-year problem, 30-year long problem, and I don't know that there's any answer that any engineering company is going to give the people of Blacks Harbor that is going to be satisfactory until they have clean drinking water.
And to say once again that we've been friends while you were at Global covering the story. You've been here for a year and a half. I can't believe it. But yeah, I think I went with you on 2 different stories before you even were at CHCO and The Courier covering Blacks Harbor Water, where we would meet up in the area. So it has been going on a really, really long time, and they really are looking for answers. We still have big jars of water here. We won't get rid of them until this water situation is fixed once and for all. We have jars from Adam Hatt that our Aidan Rayner has one pre-filtered that is very brown and one filtered that's still quite brown. So it gives you an idea visually what they're dealing with. But the reality of it is that, if you have a newborn baby, you don't necessarily feel comfortable giving them a bath. It's not exactly the type of water. In St. Andrews, I don't mind drinking tap water, but it's hard to pour your family round of brown water at the dinner table. So it definitely comes at an expense, whether that just means buying bottled water. Everything is so expensive right now. To add that in to your already expensive grocery bill is a lot to ask of people.
But it wasn't the only thing that you thought was interesting at the meeting.
Well, I was trying to figure out what clip to use from the meeting, and the one that really I wasn't expecting to even see that night was from the Beautification Committee. So Councillor Alexa Dedorakis heads the Beautification Committee. They all have different portfolios, the councillors. And I'm throwing this out there for anyone thinking of running next year. We've got municipal elections, May 2026. So why not start watching now if you thought about running, get an idea of what goes on, what's asked of a councillor. So they often take on different portfolios. Councillor Dedorakis is on the Beautification Committee for Eastern Charlotte. So she showed council a video for, we know, the beautiful post office in St. George. It is a landmark. I learned a lot about it at council, actually. It's a building that was designed by Mott, I guess a famous architect who also did the New Brunswick Museum in St. Andrews. Fun fact, they actually did the Bell building downtown, the phone building on Water Street. So that's a neat connection to this part of the world too. But granted, obviously is so synonymous with St. George. And they want to make the post office, Government of Canada building, I think it's also called, a center point of town. Not that it isn't already, but to really emphasize that with the project. So there is a designer named Philip LeBlanc. He's originally from Eastern Charlotte, so he did this project pro bono. But when you watch the video, you will be so impressed by how he integrated every detail and really made it represent the community without doing anything that's too over the top. It really is quite simple. But the way it's designed is very inviting and celebrates Eastern Charlotte and the things that are beautiful about it, both the history and the natural resources and, a small community that wants a meeting place.
Why don't we take a listen to what he had to say?
This is designer Philip LeBlanc's proposed plans for the post office in St. George, presented by Councillor Dedorakis at the November council meeting for Eastern Charlotte.
It would definitely breathe life into our downtown. And it still respects it still has historical and architectural significance.
I've had the pleasure to work on many design projects around the world, but there's nothing more exciting than the opportunity to dream about projects in my old hometown. In this Telegraph Journal article from 1936, I love the fact that the family who built our house in St. George was also part of the team that brought this building to life. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge the architect who is responsible for the post office, Harry Clare Mott. He and his father are responsible for many important structures around the Maritimes, some of which you would have interacted with over the years. There are many utility buildings scattered all over the Maritimes, but this is the telephone building in St. Andrews, liquor store in St. George. I know it's now the Butcher, but we still refer to it, I think everyone from my generation, as the old liquor store. We have the Forestry and Genealogy Building at UNB Fredericton. And lastly, we have the amazing New Brunswick Museum, which is about to embark on a bit of an edition of its own. So back to St. George. I really love the fact that even in this drawing, which Harry Mott created before he even broke ground on the building, he referred to it as a public building. And I think that's indicative of how we all feel about it. Even in this recent post by Faith Avery is further validation of our shared love and collective ownership of the post office. And that brings us to the practice of designing for a place. This has been a driving quote in our practice since day one. The things we build wind up having an incredible impact on our life. The importance of our design environment cannot be ignored. This is me and my partner Scott, and we operate an international design studio where we get to work with complex challenges and work with amazing people. We co-design for a better future. I've also had the honor to work with Dr. John LaRue for the last 15 years on many projects. He's the one who actually sent me that original drawing from the Provincial Archives. We've been bringing groups of UNB students to St. George for many years. John received the Order of New Brunswick for his outstanding vision, dedication, and commitment to the future architecture and the protection of historic buildings in New Brunswick. He has written 18 books on architecture and visual culture, including the pertinent Building New Brunswick and Architectural History. So it's a rare bonus to have John agree to help out with this project. This is a recent memorial project that we created with the Fredericton Police Force to commemorate the fallen officers from 2019. From the built environment having an impact on everything we do, to the idea of public spaces, placemaking is at the center of this project. We always feel like a simple place to begin is with these 4 simple guidelines: accessibility, comfort and image, sociability, uses and activities. We know that place-based design strengthens community identity, attracts visitors, inspires local pride, and fundamentally drives community resilience in towns and communities. Having said all that, it was really fun to sketch a building that I would have drawn many times growing up, this time with a completely different objective: to bring to life the idea that the Post Office Plaza should function as an embrace to the community and to anyone who visits the town. As someone mentioned in those Facebook comments earlier, it is great to come down Main Street and be greeted by such a beautiful building. This rendering is the result of many sketches and iterations. Here you can see what I mean by embrace, with the benches forming a circle that is open and welcoming. There are 2 main elements to notice, one being a clear central focus. The building is the star of the town. This plaza is here to assist in its stature and provide an appropriate approach to the structure. The second characteristic is scale modulation. The proportions of the plaza are equally matched to the building, not in competition. Here are 2 chunks of granite that are in the foreground. This acts as a reminder of complementary colors. We all think of the post office as being pink granite, but it is actually the gray granite that really activates the pink color and keeps it vibrant and timeless. So we want to acknowledge that with these 2 pieces. Of course, we need to see how this situation looks like when the sun goes down. So this is an opportunity to use targeted lighting to highlight the material warmth of the natural wood and stone being used. By keeping the plaza constrained and simple, we allow the entire property to work together. Here's an overview of the current site, and I'll walk you through a couple design details from the process. The first thing you'll notice is the presence of permeable edges. You can access the seating from all angles. This allows for flexibility of space, but still provides some intimacy when seated centrally. We've employed dual geometry to achieve balance and harmony of scale, not unlike the same principle used in public space in Europe for over 500 years. A bit more math and engineering, and the result is a site-specific design that elevates a space with humble local materials. Speaking of materials, here's a quick look at some of the elements a bit closer. For the benches, we recommend using gabions, basically metal cages that allow us to use smaller raw chunks of granite to juxtapose the higher finished granite of the post office. Here are a few examples that demonstrate the material. It's not uncommon to see entire buildings used in contemporary architecture using gabions to various lengths. The top of the benches can be finished with birch hardwood as a nod to the original wooden modern finishes in 1936. The last portion of this project will look at one area of inspiration taken from our storied past. The hands that labored in the granite quarries would have split that stubborn granite for decades using small-scale tools called feather wedges. They were such a prominent part of the industry, I thought it'd be fun to use the same form, scale it up, and tackle one of the necessary components for the post office, a bike rack. Since bike racks are always accessed in a row, I found the same characteristics in the process of splitting stones with wedges. Here's a simple rendering of a potential arrangement. Take note of that intentional crack, which will inspire curiosity. Perhaps we'll have a QR code nearby to give information on the unique bike racks and why the crack exists. Of course, we need to see how things look when the sun goes down. And with that, I'll leave you with one final image and thank you for your time.
Those were Philip LeBlanc's proposed design plans for the post office in Eastern Charlotte, presented by Alexa Dedorakis on behalf of the Beautification Committee at Eastern Charlotte Council this November.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to take a look at what the team's doing next week.
Welcome back to This Week Uncut. I'm Vicki Hogarth.
And I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
Looking ahead to this, well, let's look back at this week. I lost my voice, which I think I don't have to tell you if you've been watching the whole hour of this show, but we've been busy on the road with Santa's Helpers, taping all the school choirs from across Charlotte County. So over 1,000 school kids from our area will be singing on November 30th, right here on CHCO from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. But it's definitely a lot of work leading up to it.
Yeah, I did my first Santa's Helpers road trip with Patrick in Back Bay. Back Bay joined us for the first time. And so there were 3 groups of kids that came, and they all sang, I think 3 songs each, one in French. It was wonderful to be a part of, even, I was doing the bare minimum. Pounding from back and forth. So it was a wonderful experience.
It really is. It really gives that whole "it takes a village" slogan that we use so often in a small community. It brings it to light, though. It makes it so real because you see these kids singing really to help kids from their own county. It really is all of us getting together to make sure that everyone in Charlotte County has a wonderful Christmas. So again, if you are a business or want to be a big donor to Santa's Helpers, you can call in the day of, but you can also reach out to us beforehand so that we can organize a giant check presentation, because I think when there's big donations, sometimes it's nice to spotlight the company or the individual organization that is giving that big donation to Santa's Helpers. So please reach out in advance of the telethon if that's something you or your company or someone you know would be interested in doing. If not, you call here day of. It's going to be 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on November 30th. Tons of volunteers will be in here, and it is an exciting day. You got to experience it last year. This is the first year, though, you got to decorate smile cookies with me, because we are also a part of Tim Hortons. We have to thank Carl Dow of the St. Stephen and St. Andrews Tim Hortons for once again teaming up with Santa's Helpers. Smile cookie for St. Stephen and St. Andrews will be split. The funds raised this week, ongoing, ends on Sunday, between Santa's Helpers and Tim Hortons Summer Camp. So it takes care of our kids in the community in the winter and also in the summer ones, those who might not be as fortunate as kids who already have plans to go for summer.
I'm just so relieved to have feeling back in my arms.
We did win the Smile Cookie. We beat Mayor Alan McEachran and Carrie from Santa's Helpers Committee. It was kind of a competition. So we knew we had to beat 720.
Yes, and we beat 4 RCMP officers.
That's true. 2 of us in an hour and a half decorated 732 cookies.
Yeah, so this is a challenge to Mayor Al and to the RCMP to step their game up next year.
Next year, who knew? Who knew we had all this muscle in us? But it was fun. It brings it all together. It makes it so meaningful. So I am hoping to have my voice back for the telethon. Maybe this is a good thing that it's gone this week. Or it could be a sign of what's to come. I don't know.
Well, we certainly hope that you'll join us in giving back to Charlotte County. Thanks for watching This Week Uncut. I'm Nathalie Sturgeon.
And Vicki Hogarth. See you next week.